Hey kids, we're back with Little Pilgrims Progress, and we're gonna continue on uh, in our chapters here. Last time we left off, little Christian was sort of in a bad way, but then things got better. He escaped from the giant, and he was with the king's shepherds, and so they get to rest. Him and Hopeful get to rest and eat plenty of food and just be refreshed. So, what a blessing to be in their presence. So, we'll continue on in chapter 37, the rock of error and mountain caution. The next day, when the pilgrims were preparing to continue their journey, the shepherds came to them and asked whether they would like to go for a walk upon the mountains before they went away. Christian and Hopeful thought they would enjoy this very much. So the shepherds went with them over the broad green slopes and along the path that had been cut upon the hills. It is not safe, said Knowledge, for strangers to walk across these mountains alone. But the king allows us to take some of the pilgrims to see the view of the celestial city. Presently they came to a steep path that was rugged and not very easy to climb. It led to the top of a great rock, and when they reached the high point, Christian and Hopeful were glad to put their hands into those of the shepherds and hold them very tightly indeed. The rock was just at the edge of the mountain when the little pilgrims looked down from it. They could see a valley far below, and upon the ground at the bottom of the valley lay bodies of many dead people. Did they fall from this rock? Asked Hopeful. Yes, replied the shepherds. This is the rock of error. And the pilgrims who leave the way of the king and wander upon the mountains alone are fond of climbing up this pathway, because they think they will have a better view from the rock. But when they look over, the sight of the deep valley makes them giddy, and they fall and are killed. Then the shepherds took the children to another place, which is called Mount Caution. From it they looked upon a wide plain where numbers of men and women and children were walking up and down. And they walked in a strange way, stretching out their hands as if to fill what was before them. And Christian noticed that they were kept stumbling upon the rocks. Are they blind? He said. Experience answered that they were. Did you see a stile on the left hand of the road, not far from the mountain? Asked Watchful. Yes, replied Christian. Beyond that stile is a pathway that leads to a strong castle. In a castle lives a giant named Despair. Many pilgrims go over the mountain because near to the stile is the way of the king, is rough and stony, and the giant's path looks green and smooth. Then they almost always lose their way, and Despair seizes them and carries them to their castle. He is very cruel for them, and at last, if he does not kill them, he puts out their eyes and brings them down to this plain where they wander about until they die. Christian and Hopeful looked at each other, but they did not speak. Perhaps if they had not escaped from Doubting Castle by the help of the little key, they too would have been left to perish upon this plain. The shepherds now went down the mountain upon the side that was furthest from the way of the king. Soon they came to the spot that reminded Christian of the entrance to the dark valley. Great black rocks hung over the path, and the children could only see a little distance down the narrow road because of the thick mist that lay before them. This is another dangerous place, said Knowledge, and pilgrims who walk alone upon the mountains are often lost here. This path leads into the country of the wicked prince, and the pilgrim who enters it is never able to find his way back again. All of these things made the little pilgrims very thoughtful. But Christian afterwards said, I am glad that we saw them, although I was frightened, because now we shall be very careful indeed about keeping to the way of the king. Chapter 38, Ignorance. Last of all, the shepherds brought the little pilgrims to the top of the hill called Mount Clear, from which they could see a very long way indeed. Far in the distance, a beautiful light was shining, which dazzled their eyes when they tried to look at it. In the midst of the light, said a shepherd, is the celestial city. If your eyes are strong, you will be able to see its gates. But the light was brighter than that of sun at midday, and its glory was too great for the human eyes to bear. I can only see it shining, said Little Christian. It is too bright for you, said Sincere. but we have a glass called faith, which will make it seem clearer. Christian took the glass, but the thought of the king's city, which he had so longed to see, made him tremble, and his hand shook so that he could not hold the glass steadily. Then Hopeful tried, but tears came to his eyes. "It dazzles me," he said, "but I think I can see something like a gate." The walk upon the mountains had taken up the whole of the morning, so the shepherds led the children back to their tents and made them rest a little while before they went away. Then they traveled a little further. Said Experience, "You will very likely meet a man called Flatterer. He may try to lead you out of the way of the king, but you must not listen to what he says." Then Watchful told them that they would soon come to a place called the Enchanted Ground, where the air made the pilgrims feel very sleepy. It is part of the wicked prince's countries, and if his servants find you sleeping there, they will carry you away. "We will give you a little map," said Knowledge, putting a sheet of paper into Christian's hands. "All the places you have to pass are marked upon it, and if you look upon it carefully, you cannot lose your way." As Christian and Hopeful went down the mountain path, they talked together of all that the shepherds had shown them. "If we could only have seen the celestial city," said Christian, "I should have been so glad." "Well," said Hopeful, "we did see the glory of it, and we know that now it is not very far away." At the foot of the mountains, the boys came to the corner of a little crooked lane. This lane led from a country called Conceit, and a lad was running along toward the way of the king. Then Christian and Hopeful passed. "Where do you come from?" asked Christian, for the boys soon overtook them. "From the country beyond the hills," he replied, "and I am going to the celestial city." "But do you think they will let you in?" said Christian. "Why not? They let everybody else in." "Not everybody. We have our rolls to show. Did the king send you one?" "No, but I don't suppose it will matter. I am his servant because I always do what he bids me. I have heard that he wishes people to leave their own lands and travel to his city, so I am going just as you are." "But," said Christian, "the king's pilgrim ought to come in at the wicket gate and pass by the cross. Then the shining ones will bring them a white dress and a roll. I'm afraid you didn't know that." "You needn't make such a fuss about it," replied the boy, whose name was Ignorance. "I don't know where you come from, but it is very likely you live near the wicket gate, and of course it is convenient for you to enter it. It is a very long way from my home, and nobody ever thinks of going to it. In fact, I don't believe that anybody knows the way. We have that pleasant green lane which saves all trouble and makes our pilgrimage shorter." Christian scarcely knew what to answer. As Ignorance stopped to gather some fruit, the little pilgrims passed on without him. He did not run after them, and Hopeful said, "Shall we wait for him?" "I think not," replied Christian. "Perhaps he will join us presently." Chapter 39, the story of Little Faith. Christian and Hopeful had not walked very far before them when they saw a band of soldiers in the distance. They were clothed in dark armor which did not shine as Christians did, and the little pilgrim knew that they belonged to the army of the wicked prince. "Do you think they will hurt us?" asked Hopeful. "I don't know," replied Christian. The boys both felt frightened, although they kept steadily on their way. But as the soldiers drew near, the children saw they had a prisoner among them, and they knew by his dress that he was one of the king's pilgrims. The soldiers were hurrying him along and took no notice of Christian and Hopeful as they passed by. The pilgrim hung his head, for he was ashamed to let the children see his face. He had once loved the king and had traveled very nearly to the gates of the celestial city. Then he began to wander from the path, and before long he met some of the servants of the wicked prince, who pretended to be very kind to him. He stayed with them, and soon they forgot the good king. He forgot the good king and left off obeying his laws. He allowed his bright armor to grow rusty, and his garments became soiled and ragged. His roll was lost, and no one would have known he'd ever served the king at all. But one day, something reminded him of the celestial city, and he began to feel sorry for what he had done, and to wonder whether the king would forgive him. After a while, he left his new friends and tried to find his way back again into the straight path. The wicked prince heard that he was gone and sent a band of soldiers to look for him. And when the poor pilgrim drew his sword to defend himself, he found that it was spoiled with rust and he could not use it. So the soldiers bound him in chains and now were taking him back into the country of the wicked prince. Christian and Hopeful were glad that the soldiers did not speak to him, but they were also very sorry for the pilgrim who seemed to be in great trouble. I remember, said Pilgrim as they went on, when I was at the Palace Beautiful, I read a story of a pilgrim named Little Faith, who was robbed not far from here, from this place. I think that the wicked prince's servants often come up here, and we must be very careful, or they may perhaps hurt us. Tell me about Little Faith, said Hopeful. How was he robbed? He was very tired, replied Christian, and he sat down upon the grass to rest, and he fell asleep. It was just at the corner of one of the lanes that we had passed, so it was not a safe place to sleep in. 3 bad boys, I think their names were Faint Heart, Mistrust, and Guilt, were playing in the lane, and they saw Little Faith lying at the corner, so they thought they would steal his things. They were just walking. He was just waking when they seized him, and before he had time to get his sword, they threw him upon the ground and beat him dreadfully. Then they took all of the money out of his pocket, and perhaps they would have killed him, but they thought they heard someone coming. Who was it? There wasn't anyone really, but they knew they were doing wrong, and they were frightened. There was a little village called Good Confidence somewhere among these mountains, and Great Grace, one of the king's captains, lives there. The boy thought he had seen them, and so they ran away. And what became of Little Faith? Was he hurt very much? Yes, but they had not found his roll. So although he was grieved the loss of his money, he felt comforted, and after a little while he was able to get up and go on his journey. We'll stop there at right before we'll look at chapter 40 next week. Again, they're facing many adventures, many trials, ups and downs. And that's what we face in the Christian life. And there may be people that will try to take us off our path and teach us things that we don't, that are not true. Like, for instance, the one boy who didn't want to enter the way that God had told him to and didn't want to go to the cross. That happens sometimes. There are many people that will try to take us away from Jesus or believing the Bible. And we have to stand firm on what God has told us. It's so important that we stand on that truth and we continue to walk the King's path. So hopefully you'll join me next time as we keep on journeying. We have about maybe 9 chapters to go. So we've got maybe 3 or so videos left. So stay with me. We're almost to the end when Christian, spoiler alert, Christian is going to reach the celestial city. Have a great day.